Hey, this is Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast, here to tell you that Michelob Ultra, the official beer partner of the NBA, is bringing NBA fans closer than ever this season with chances to win great prizes, including courtside tickets. Enter now at michelobultra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Courtside 25 to 26. No purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 plus. Begins on October 1st, 2025 and ends on June 30th, 2026. Multiple entry periods. See official rules at michelobultra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
Corn is neither the solution nor the problem. In episode 27, the corn episode, we introduced the idea of corn on the landscape and that it was not the ultimate answer to all your problems. The duck migration dilemma does not have a silver bullet, but hey, it ain't corn. Corn is not the silver bullet answer to it all. It is not the answer to your duck shooting needs, and it is not the answer to why you are not shooting ducks. I guess I put the cart ahead of the horse there, kids. But sorry, kids, the answer is never as easy as that. Today we are joined by Heath Hagy. I wrote Heath is a beast from Oklahoma, but it's because he's like 7'5" and like 290 pounds. I think he played college football at some point. I did spend some time with him at Mississippi State University, but he spent his younger years studying moist soil management at Mississippi and beyond. Then he went on to manage ducks in the Southeast U.S., is the Southeast U.S. waterfowl biologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Heath was basically charged with understanding what type of duck habitat was needed in the Southeast U.S. region, and especially on national wildlife refuges. More specifically, Heath was charged with understanding how to ensure we could support the millions of hungry ducks that come to the Southeast U.S. each winter. He also has been involved in an abundance of research on changes in duck migration using telemetry and banding. He's collaborated across the board with Cohen, that Cohen lab in Tennessee you all have heard of, and colleagues in Missouri as well as others. Today he lives in Bismarck, North Dakota. He first and foremost is a duck hunter at heart, a farm kid, and I'd say secondarily is a waterfowl ecologist and now the project leader with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the Habitat and Population Evaluation Team. We affectionately call it HAPIT. HAPIT is part of the National Wildlife Refuge System of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The HAPIT office supports the conservation mission of the service by integrating scientific data and landscape-scale conservation planning with a focus on migratory birds. And I'd say waterfowl are a very big portion of that. This enables the service to more effectively conserve and manage wildlife in their habitats for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and conservation partners, and I'd say the duck hunters across duck country USA. So, sorry, Heath, I feel like I overspent my time on that intro. I guess I could have recorded that before you were sitting having to stare at me and listen to that mumbo jumbo. But I do not feel like I oversold you, so ego up, my friend. Welcome to the Foul Weather Podcast.
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it. Pleasure to be back with you. I don't know. We've done a couple of these, right? So nice to be back.
I believe so. What are your metrics? Are you 7'5" and 290 pounds, or what are we getting now?
Really close to that. I think I'm only about 6'3", but you'd be closer to my brother's height, right? Remember, I'm the runt in the family.
Yeah, because they grow big. So I want to say Hackberry Flats, like wildlife management area, is somewhere near home. Is that?
That's exactly right. I grew up less than 10 miles from Hackberry Flat, WMA in southwestern Oklahoma, Tillman County, near the little town of Frederick. It was when I was in elementary school. They were getting that whole thing off the ground, acquiring land, getting that WMA kind of set up. And at some point, I'm sure, I think we built bluebird boxes, and when I was in elementary school, went and put them out at Hackberry Flat when it was just getting started. So that place is special to me.
Yeah, that's cool. And the only reason I really know about it is I spent two kind of spring through early fall in Tishomingo at the National Wildlife Refuge for some of my master's work. So I got a little familiar with the environments around Oklahoma. But what were you guys cattle? What were y'all? farm-wise?
Yeah, on the family farm, we did we did lease out pasture for grazing a little bit for dairy cows. A lot of dairy operations had moved into the area when I was kind of middle school, high school. We mostly did a wheat and cotton rotation growing up.
Good stuff. But now you're in Bismarck, which is a
I'm in Bismarck.
little different. You jumped around a little. You were in Tennessee when you were doing the Southeast stuff, right?
Yeah, yep. I've been in Mississippi and East and West Tennessee, Illinois, Havana, Illinois, with the Natural History Survey. Was the director there at Forbes Station for five or 6 years, and then bounced back down to Tennessee, and now up at Happett in Bismarck, North Dakota. So it's been a good run, even though I was living in West Tennessee. As you said, I was sort of running all over the Southeast region, from Florida up to North Carolina, over to Arkansas, and then down to Louisiana. That was kind of my range that I covered for the refuge system as kind of an internal consultant for waterfowl management and conservation planning, and then got to collaborate on a lot of research. You mentioned with Dr. Cohen there at the Cohen Wildlife Lab at Tennessee Tech, also with Doug Osborne over at UAM, at LSU with Kevin Ringelman, with Brian Davis down at Mississippi State, and some others, Lisa Webb up at Mizzou. So blessed to have been able to collaborate on lots of research and bring a lot of science into the refuge system that really informed very specifically those very applied questions that we need, some of which had to do a lot with food and how we manage and how much we should have.
Well, and thanks for covering all those folks, because I can't always remember. I mean, I forgot you were at Forbes for some reason there. I mean, there's just too many. Some of us, there's just too many things we've done, right, as we've kind of advanced in our careers. But yeah, thanks for doing the laundry list of the folks you've worked with. So sounds like you just did a little road trip to where you're at right now for the holidays. Yeah. And so what's winter weather in Bismarck? And then let the folks know kind of where you drove, where you're sitting, and what it all looked like.
Yeah, the I guess the high level report from the Dakotas is cold early. I don't know exactly what the snow total is in Bismarck this year, but I think it's more than 15 inches of snow. It's more than we've had the last couple of winters since I've been up there. So that's good. And it's been pretty cold, so we should have a pretty good frost seal. Everything is frozen. Most of the Missouri River that we drove, along was frozen. Making the long drive from North Dakota down to Arkansas, and then I'll drive back go over to Oklahoma and drive back up through, and so I'll see some of the Central Flyway on the way back when I head back here in a few days. But yeah, it's nice and cold. When the weather got here, boy, it got here. I'm sure your model sort of said those kinds of things, Mike. I didn't see really much open water until we hit southern Nebraska and northern Missouri. Started to see a few birds and a little bit of open water, but I certainly didn't see much hanging out very, very high in the mid-continent areas. It seems like that birds moved, and they kind of maybe where they are going to be for the majority of winter. You can tell us. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I suspect they're going.
I don't want to talk about January right now. We'll do it on a later episode, but all fingers really point to this reorganizing of the polar vortex. It might spin it might look like a bowling ball on top of the globe before we know it. We hope there's a bunch of stretched polar vortex stuff that hits the Mississippi Atlantic Flyway. That's still possible, but there were, I don't want to get into it too much, but really quickly, there were 3 doors to this. There's the sudden stratospheric warming, which if that happened, which it didn't, we would have been in a month-long cold spell. There's the on and off stretched polar vortex where that thing wobbles and starts and spits cold down at different latitudes, probably mostly east of the Rockies. And then there's the really well-organized polar vortex. We are out of the sudden stratospheric warming, the SSW range. We're into probably a little bit of a wobble, but looks like a lot of fingers are pointing towards really strong reorganization of that polar vortex. So I think January is kind of it's not a bust. I mean, ducks move around, shuffle around locally and stuff, and maybe even, move farther north in their wintering area than normal. As folks will know, I don't know if you listened to the last episode, but I'm not a fan of the term reverse migration. So a lot of us are not, but there's another term out there. But anyhow, I'll catch some flack for saying reverse migration doesn't exist. So, but, your season, did it get cut short then? Duck
We
shooting
actually,
wise.
yeah, that's a really good question. So just for context, North Dakota season, we open up in late September for residents for about a week, and then we open everyone else, and then it goes into, I think, technically into early December. I don't remember the exact date there. I I don't think I've ever hunted December in North Dakota and not done a ton of November hunting. I love to hunt water. I'll hunt fields a little bit, but I love to hunt water. So when that water freezes, I may move on to other things, go chase some pheasants or something, and sort of move on with my life a little bit. But we had open water mostly until Thanksgiving, thereabouts. We kind of got our big first long-term freeze around Thanksgiving. That's pretty late, given from the last few years. And so we held on and had some decent hunting, had some pushes of birds, pushes of divers there in November, and had some good hunting. And then it got cold, and we started getting snow, and it pretty much locked up. I'm sure some geese stuck around there into December toward the end of season, but I didn't. This southern blooded person, right? There's a limit to how much I'm going to go lay in a field, in 0 degree weather and wait on a big goose. Credit to those who will do it. It's mostly not me. So anyway, we actually got a pretty good season, pretty good length of time. But then when it was over right around Thanksgiving, it was pretty much over.
It was over. It wasn't like a back and forth like it has been in the past.
Not big. Maybe we had a little bit of a cold snap there. I want to say around the 15th or something like that. But yeah, for the most part, when it was over, yeah, and that's usually what happens. Sometimes you get a warming effect and back up, but then if you get that week-long cold snap, you've lost a lot of your dabbling ducks, and it's it could be pretty thin even if it warms back up. If you get that snow and that cold snap in late October, early November, it usually be a little bit unproductive there in November, unless you really find a good source, on a river or on a big reservoir or something, and get into some field hunting. That can be really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and people always say, hey, the ducks are finally here, and I'm like, no, 85% of your ducks are south of you. They're just very concentrated and easy to kill right now. And I'm the one, I spent 2 winters on Lake Ontario for my doctoral work shooting 750 sea ducks up there. So I'm not one to sit when it's minus 20 in a boat on water, because I've done it over and over again. And I feel like I spent all my cat lives or whatever the heck they are out there doing that.
Hear that.
But, and I also kind of feel like once you hit that point, and those are the ducks that are staying, some of those might be your local breeders even, especially your mallards, your black ducks and stuff. So I'm kind of giving them a break. I'm not judging people. It's just, not my thing once it gets that late. And then, I kind of, like today, Sarah and I, my wife and I we're going to take the yellow labs out and chase some pheasants for the afternoon here, and kind of start our Christmas break, hopefully. Kind of moved on from the duck stuff for the most part, ice fishing gear's ready, and we're starting to get good ice that might be safe. So I know some folks.
Are y'all locked up there in New York?
Well, the Finger Lakes never do, and the St. Lawrence River doesn't. Lake Ontario doesn't. So we still have, we got lots of moving water. So we still have habitat, and we still got birds around. They've just all been shot at now since the opener. Right. I don't know, 2 weeks ago of our second split, or 3 weeks ago. I can't remember now. So they're just pretty smart is the biggest thing, right? They all just get up, sit in the middle of the lake, and don't come near you. And I mean, you can't even lay out hunt in some of the Finger Lakes because they're, 800 feet deep or whatever. Nobody's got line to hold a boat at that depth. Sure. So that's what they just go sit in. But anyhow, so you guys at least have a good frost seal, it sounds like. A little bit of snow. But what's it going to take to recharge that prairie habitat at this point? I mean, it's still pretty dry for y'all.
Pretty dry. We've been sort of trending that way. Okay. So I don't want to get too nuanced here, but the last few springs early on have been very dry, and we've been very concerned, and even started out because we were very, very. This is the U.S. prairies, right? In the Dakotas mostly. Started out very dry. And then we've gotten pretty wet, but it's been a little later than we would like it. So we would like to have that snow melt, maybe a little bit of rain coming out of late April, establish those pair ponds early, have some ducks settle in the area. That's generally not happened for the past couple of years. It's been closer to May 15th or even a little later that we've gotten a lot of the water. And so, if you look at some of the survey data, or, let's say in late May, you took a drive across North Dakota, it's plenty wet. There's plenty of water up here. And we had pretty decent conditions in late May, but we missed some of those early settling ducks. So certainly not terrible. Probably a kind of an average or a little bit below average type of year, consistent with what our national BPOP survey said. I think that was pretty consistent. It's pretty close to what our results from 4 square mile breeding waterfowl survey that we do at HAPIT said. Just kind of a little bit of a below average year. Water came a little bit late. Kind of same thing happened last year. Kind of ho hum, tracking along. Nothing major, but not the conditions that are really going to help us sort of pop up out of this little bit of a low cycle that we're in with, mallards down. What is it, like 50% since 2015, something like that, 40 or 50%. So we really need a bunch of water early in the year in areas where we have grass, where we have all the conservation programs on the ground, where we don't have tile drainage that's going to pull that water off the landscape really, really quick. And so all those things sort of have to line up to get that boom cycle again that we really saw in the late 90s.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay, a holiday you're saving.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. This season, enjoy spacious, comfortable rooms and friendly service when you book with Hilton instead. Hilton for the stay.
Well, in my prediction, given the La Nina year, it seems like the La Nina is going to fade a little quicker than what we want it to. And with the warm kind of coming as well, potentially in January, that's not helpful. But our prediction here is, February, March might still, and it might still kind of get hit with a blizzard or whatever. And that's a nasty term, because I remember driving up there in the late 90s and just, as the thaw came, just seeing dead cattle out in the fields. Yeah. Sure. It was rough when it snows up there, and it's just it gets hot in the summer, gets cold in the winter. It's either really dry or really wet. Like, it seems at least like a tweener right now for farmers, so I'm not hoping this for farmers, but like that February, March stuff where it can just snow and snow and snow. And it's very much, continental, what's called synoptic stuff, where cold and warm fronts start hitting each other up there and really just dumping a lot of atmospheric snow. That's what we're hoping for the ducks, right, for sure. Is that going to fix everything in 1 year? No, this nope. Has to be. But when it happens pretty fast, because we send way more ducks south than we're going to shoot. And they come back and they rebound when the conditions are right. The success rate of nesting and broods and stuff goes up. So I'd like to think we're kind of on the upswing from that. Is it going to get worse than this? Maybe, but I don't. Possible. It's possible, but I think we're on that upswing. Everybody's interested in, given the tile and all that other stuff that happened since, in land conversion and things that have happened, since we had our last high, what this next bump's going to look like. My expectation, it's going to be a little lower, but it'll still, when that water comes back, it overwhelms whatever people seem to do to that landscape. So.
Exactly right. It's pretty amazing how ducks can find a place to nest, and it's all about timing, right? If we get a lot of snow, we've got maybe some field tillage that can't happen until later in the year, and all of a sudden, okay, there's not permanent grass or dense nesting cover or something like that on the landscape here. but we've got some idle areas that sometimes just happen because of precipitation patterns, and farmers can't get into the fields. And some ducks, some pintail can make that work. Mallards can make that work. It's amazing how many mallards can come out of a ditch. I'm not saying that that should be our
want, right?
That's not what we want. But when the conditions get right, there's a lot of water. And there are just enough marginal areas they really can boom. And we also think that brood survival probably picks up at that time, at least for a couple of years, depending on other predator prey cycles. And it's complicated, right? There's a lot going on, but you can have brood survival really pick up the slack too. We think, not just nesting super important, brood survival important, all leading to that recruitment metric. And at the end of the day, that's probably what hunters experience way more than breeding population size. They experience that annual recruitment, right? How many ducks enter the fall flight? And that's, that's highly variable. It's really complicated to estimate, but that's, that can have a huge impact, and that brood water can be probably a big portion of that.
Well, what's crazy right now is like those basins are kind of dry. The cattails crept in. Pheasants, you guys got pheasants coming out here. What? They got that. They got winter cover, right? But then, then you get a little bit of water, and the water goes up into those cattails. Then you get high brood survival because they're not isolated in an open pond. They got brood cover. Pheasants, there's a period where ducks and pheasants are both good for a short period sometimes, but then you get that major flooding that floods out the cattail rim. Pheasant populations kind of will crash at times, especially with like a really high snow winter. And then, but that edge moves for the ducks after that, right? It does start to move as well. But yeah, it's complex. Throw predators on top of it, not just grassland predators, but your mink and stuff that are,
avian predators. Exactly.
Avian predators, yeah. So anyhow, folks are here to hear about the corn debate.
Wait, we're talking about corn today?
Which we are not actually going to do. We're not going to debate. He's just here to answer some straightforward Q&A. I told him I also got a guy who specializes in legal counsel for Migratory Bird Treaty Act. That's going to be the other portion of the corn stuff. So I'm not diving into the damn debate because, to be honest, it's gotten ridiculous on the social media for the most part. And I'm just not going to get into that fray. But what we do at the Foul Weather Podcast is we provide you with the good information, and you guys can figure it out from there. So we're going to do straightforward Q&A with Heath and hopefully inform you about things that maybe you are not entirely familiar with. Heath, first, your job now, where you're at with Habitat is different. And I think the things we just talked about, honestly, probably a bigger lift to make duck breeding habitat happen and happen well than feeding ducks during winter, right? But we do have very calculated strategic plans to make sure that both habitat needs are met during the breeding season and the non-breeding season. So I really want to hear about how habitat needs for wintering ducks, that's the time of year we're in, how those habitat needs for wintering ducks are calculated kind of in the most broad sense when it kind of comes to calories on the landscape.
Absolutely. All right. I will try not to go into recovering academic mode is what I call it, right? Trying to get out of the university mindset that I used to be in.
And I had too many cups of coffee this morning, so if you go too long, I got to take a pee break from this interview. So maybe
perfect. I'll start at a high level. We use calories as a planning metric. Our migratory bird joint ventures, those are partnerships between state and federal agencies, and even private entities, come together and try to make sure that we know how much habitat that we need on the landscape for the number of birds or other critters that are going to show up and use that habitat. We don't want habitat to be limiting, especially in the winter, right? We don't need to get into a debate about the proportional importance of breeding areas and wintering areas. We know they all have a role here, and winter and migration habitat certainly has a role in the annual cycle of waterfowl. Typically what we do, many joint ventures and wintering and migration areas do this. We in the National Wildlife Refuge System do this as well. we use bioenergetic models. That's a fancy way of saying we count calories, just like, many diet plans that you might have been on. We're counting calories. There are a bunch of assumptions that go into it, but we know that your average size duck might use up about 300 calories a day. So we call that a duck energy day, or a waterfowl energy day, or a duck use day, whatever we call it, right? There's some energy metric that's very similar to our sort of fixed 2,000 kilocalories that a human might have, right? I mean, I'm more of a 3,000 calorie kind of guy when I'm not on my diet, Mike, but I probably should be a 2,000 calorie guy. Anyway, so we know that that's the currency that we work in. We want to make sure that that is not limiting. We worry about sanctuary. We worry about all kinds of survival, all kinds of other things. But the metric that we often use for planning, for consistency, and because we know a lot about it, is the calorie in these bioenergetic models. That's not where we start, though. We start with how many birds does an area need to support. Won't go into the weeds of that. We use harvest data. We use midwinter survey data. And now we're using eBird citizen science data. We use all kinds of data sources. It's getting so much better every year with the amount of data and the analytical methods. Big shout out to the folks over at Cornell and eBird and those data sets for the improvement that they've helped us do in the last few years. Getting these data sets better and getting our migration curves better, even getting that population information. Anywho, what we do is we take those and we formulate objectives. So we know that, for instance, a national wildlife refuge, let's just pick one. Let's see, Tennessee National Wildlife Refuge in West Tennessee might have a waterfowl energy objective of, I'm going to make this up because I don't remember exactly what it is, but let's say they have an energy objective of 10 million waterfowl energy days. Let's say that is something like 150,000 ducks for about 60 days, whatever that period is over that migration curve.
For the listeners, a duck energy day is one duck staying at a location and meeting its energy needs for one day.
That's correct. That's right. It takes about 300 calories to sustain that, on the average, a duck for a day, right? And we talk in terms of duck energy days, but we do the same calculations for swans and geese and cranes and so on and so forth. So we use that, but we start with how many ducks do we have? Well, if we need to sustain about 150,000 ducks at this refuge over this period of time, 60 to 90 days, using this migration curve, we use some fairly simple math and we come up with something that looks like about, in this example, 10 million energy days. Then we sort of go backwards. We say, all right, this is how much energy we need. So how much energy, we don't have to provide it all. We're just a piece of this duck's home range, whatever this area is that all of these 150,000 ducks will use for this time. There'll be birds coming in, birds leaving. We account for that as best we can. And we try to figure out how much, all right, the state has WMAs. They can provide this. Private lands, we think there's this much food over in the private lands. Well, we won't account for that. Typically, after we do that, many national wildlife refuges come to a number between 20 and 30%. So refuges don't plan to sort of hold or host all of the ducks. We don't want that. It's not required. We don't want that. We want them to move around the landscape. What we do want to do is make sure that our piece of the pie or our piece of the habitat puzzle is complete, and we're not in any way limiting those birds, that we could get them through winter, including their movement around the landscape. We account for harvest. We expect harvest around those refuges, on those WMAs, even on those refuges. So we account for it all, and we want to provide enough habitat. So we back then into our land area, and we say, all right, if we want to provide, let's say 30% of the food for the ducks in this area, what's it going to take for us to do that? Well, we know that really well-managed moist soil can produce, let's say, 3,000 energy days per acre, something like that. Unfortunately, we would have to have a lot of acres for that to get up to the 10 million. So it's often not feasible on our land base to produce all of those to hit those energy day estimates everywhere, just using moist soil or just using bottomland forest or just using open water. They all have, relatively low energy estimates compared to, or energetic carrying capacity relative to crops. And so we often use crops as a component because something like the difference between even average corn production and moist soil production may be 20x. Mm-hmm. You may get 40 or 50,000 energy days per acre out of sort of kind of average from a production standpoint corn crop in a small area compared to really well managed moist soil. So the crops are an important component, one habitat component of all of that recipe that National Wildlife Refuges and other people use on the landscape to make sure that we provide enough food for ducks. And that doesn't mean we need to do that everywhere. Sometimes we do those calculations and boy, all of us, we think there's plenty of food here. Great. We don't need to back into crops on National Wildlife Refuge. We can do something else, just moist soil management or reforest an area that used to be an ag field. We've done a lot of that so that we can provide more diverse or different kinds of habitat if that might be limiting. So that was a long diatribe, Mike. Sorry, I got on my my professor horse.
No, you're good. You're good. And so one of the things I want listeners to understand too is these National Wildlife Refuges, although lots of them are based on providing habitat for waterfowl as that migratory bird component, they have other habitat and critter objectives as well. And I talk with our folks all the time because now the Northeast U.S. refuge system no longer really allows, there's some wiggle room there, but they're really no longer allowed to plant crops on National Wildlife Refuges. It's basically like an anti-glyphosate Roundup type focus. But I always talk to them, I'm like, look, if you can feed your waterfowl on fewer acres, then you got more remaining acres for all the other critters, the marsh birds, the migratory songbirds, all the other stuff, that you're focused on as well, and other recreational opportunities for the other user groups that come to National Wildlife Refuges. But then I wouldn't want to see, and I don't think any of us would want to see us meeting all of our energy needs on crops alone for waterfowl because that's nutritionally incomplete, right? The diversity of nutrients in a moist soil wetland, including the invertebrates, the protein resources, the essential amino acids, all that stuff that's out there is also kind of vitally important. So finding that sweet spot, Heath, I think I hate this term, but it's a little bit of an art, right? Because I don't think we have that complete, well, right, because you're right, I like to use the number. But, I don't know what a least bittern needs to eat, and half our listeners don't even know what a least bittern is. So. Right? And I don't know how many of them they need. We don't have science for all these other things that we manage for, but we also can't back out all that energy straight to crops. But it does sound like crops, in general, for the Southeast U.S. have been a management tool for meeting, I would say, continental level foraging needs almost, because so many of the continent's waterfowl go to that part of the world. What happens if we get a Northeast U.S. mandate in the Southeast and say, boop, crops are gone from National Wildlife Refuges? Are we in a deficit? Where does that put us?
That's a really good question. I probably should have caveated that a minute ago, but National Wildlife Refuges go through a lot of determinations, we'll just call it paperwork, before they do any management actions, cropping being one of them. Or more often than not, we enter into co-op farm partnerships with a private landowner to come onto a National Wildlife Refuge and actually help us produce the crop because it's efficient for them, it's a good partnership, it's efficient for us, so we don't have the capacity to oftentimes do that on our own. I say that to say some refuges have capacity to produce crops or to enter these partnerships, or even partners available near a refuge that would enter into the partnership. Others don't. That varies by region. There are different determinations for using genetically modified crops versus non-availability of those different herbicides that you So if you have herbicide tolerant, a stacked variety versus not, I'm gonna quit here. But it is very complicated, right? The southeast region, my former region, tends to have the most use of those crops, or more use than other regions. Other regions have done some determinations and said those aren't, we don't think we need that in the area, so we're going to move away and just do moist soil management or reforest this area because maybe things have changed. Maybe we don't get the number of birds we used to. Others may not have the capacity, or for whatever reason have chosen not to implement crops. And so it's a whole suite of different reasons why some refuges may not, and may not, just like different states, right? Also, I have to say this too, and this will frustrate people, but every refuge is unique in that they have their own purposes, right? They have established authorities and purposes. And yes, migratory birds is something that's very common, but a refuge may not be "quote unquote" a waterfowl refuge. It may be for another kind of migratory bird. Even geese, we have a lot of refuges that were established for geese. And so, anyway, it can be complicated. And what I'm kind of saying about crops doesn't apply everywhere. But at a high level, going through the whole planning exercise and using crops as a component of that, certainly it happens at a lot of places and in a lot of refuges across the southeast region.
Well, and I simplified it because of my own frustration with us removing. Wholesale removing crops as a tool
Sure.
in my backyard, right? That's just my frustration, and them saying, well, we don't need it. And the reality is they seem to be, at least locally, readjusting their priorities towards, non-waterfowl species, because ducks and geese and swans are doing fine, so let's focus on other things. So, but that's a comment for another day outside
Sure.
of this. So, to be fair. So let's go back to that question, though, and if it is answerable, maybe it's not. I mean, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but if we hadn't removed, all these natural wetlands, traditional wetlands on the landscape that could have probably easily fed these ducks. I mean, you listen to read Lewis and Clark's, account of blackening the skies with birds, and, prior to market hunting days, but also, which was unsustainable, but also us just treating wetlands like trash, right?
Yep.
I think we probably could have easily right now with all those natural wetlands and all these birds spread out, we could have sustained these ducks in I know you hate the term natural,
Yep.
but let's call it traditional, right? Traditional wetlands, right? That were there on the landscape. Sure. We probably could have sustained all these birds energy wise, but could we, given how much we've lost, I guess that's a question. Can we do it? And in what role are crops playing in meeting that energy need? Maybe even just attack it from that straight kind of stats analytical standpoint. Like if we removed it completely, is there a deficit there? And I think hopefully you didn't sidestep that. I think you have a sense of whether we can meet it in the Southeast U.S. specifically, right?
Yeah. I'll give you the answer because I have it. I think I have it somewhat in my memory banks, and if not, Dr. Joe Marty is in my former position, and he can jump on with you, Mike, and clean up whatever that.
I should have done that. I did not keep up well enough to know that they backfilled you, because that was in question. That was in question for a little bit, wasn't it? Whether that was going to be.
It is.
So that's great.
That's right. Yep. So Joe, who is in the position, he'd be great to get on here in the future. But anyway, pending Joe's cleanup of this statistic, yes, we would be in deficit. Right. It depends on where. Not everywhere has to have crops. Not everywhere would be in a deficit because wetland loss rates are very different everywhere. But when we did this analysis for the Southeast refuges, and other regions have done something similar, we looked at how many ducks come to a general area around a refuge where they established home ranges, kind of what area they go to. And we asked the question, what's around that? Are there enough resources around that area? And so you got a different answer for every national wildlife refuge and every complex that we looked at. And yes, a number of them had deficits. I think the number was very large. I want to say it was above 100 million duck energy days. It was a very large number if we would have wiped crops off of all of those national wildlife refuges. It's a big deficit. Your probably next question is, what happens to the ducks? Well, we don't know. is the short answer. Might there be some energetic consequences? Well, I think certainly. Might there be some survival consequences? We think maybe, yes. Maybe because maybe they would be forced to move more, or we don't know exactly how it would all manifest, but we're pretty certain there would be some consequences. And then certainly would birds show up in poorer condition to breed? Maybe some of them choose not to breed. Maybe some of them have to delay breeding. Yeah, it is a cascade effect. Now, does that change population growth rates by 2% or 10% or 50%? I don't know. It's probably not 50%. We don't have all of the information to have those really, really specific analyses. But it probably has something to do with that trickle down or trickle up effect, right? Energetically and moving those birds back into good condition. In some years, is it a big deal? Probably not. In other years, yeah, it's probably a bigger deal, depending on what the spring migration habitat looks like. And do they show up to the prairies and everything's really good, and delaying a week doesn't really matter, and we can sit there and fuel up, versus a year where they show up and boy, it's, we're in rough conditions. How many competitors do they have? Do they actually, sometimes you get more competition. You have some issues at a larger population size than at a smaller one. So again, I'm sorry, it depends and it gets complicated, but circle all the way back to your original question. Would there be a deficit? Yes. If we pulled crops off of those based on the latest analysis that we did 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a couple of years before that, we think there'd be about 100 million Duck Energy Day deficit if we just pulled those crops up.
And if we figure these birds are staying there for 100 days, that's 1 million ducks. That's 1 million ducks. Right. You're not feeding. And if we go back to
and their recruits, right, the next year potentially,
and the recruits,
effect.
Yeah. So it can compound itself over multiple years. And if you remember the Baldessari and Bolin Ecology Management of Waterfowl book and that graphic in there, our best population is when we have quality water and foraging conditions in the winter during spring migration and during the breeding season. And if and they can make up some if they've got really, really good conditions in the spring. But if you got, less than optimal foraging opportunities in water in the south, you get a dry spring and a dry summer. I mean, the stars align against them. So, this kind of rolls all the way back to your initial comment of, are the breeding grounds or wintering grounds more important? I mean, there's people that will always argue for the breeding ground component, but it's not like the migration and wintering ground component aren't vitally important to the success of these populations through time. Right. And so, this is where I get to is that, crops are a tool in the toolbox, and, to remove them completely, because we've seen it here to a large degree, if not almost completely in the Northeast U.S., to remove that tool in the toolbox to manage for these birds is at best short-sighted, I think is the way I would go with it, given our current circumstances and the wetlands we have on the landscape.
Yeah, they're an important tool for something that we know is important, which is foraging habitat quality. They are a great tool. It's not like we're going to stop ducks. Philosophically, if we hate crops or we love crops, it's not like we're going to stop ducks from eating corn on the landscape or eating soybeans on the landscape or field peas on the landscape. They're going to go do it. I'm gonna really butcher this statistic. You'd have to have one of the Tennessee Tech folks on here, like Corey Highway or Brad Cohen or somebody to give you the better statistic. But when they looked at their study area a few years ago, it was shocking how much corn, mainly corn, hot crops, but mainly corn was planted in West Tennessee, not by refuges, not on WMAs. Yes, there's some. But the majority, of course, by like 10 times or 20 times, I don't remember what the statistic was, but a massive amount was planted on private duck clubs for waterfowl that those birds were going to go to after duck season at night, whenever they were going to get access to it and go, and go forage off refuge. That was really interesting. That was something we needed to know too, because it could impact how much we would put on a National Wildlife Refuge. If there's plenty of food in an area, because for the last 50 years, Duck Club X has been planning 400, acres of, that's a big number, but a bunch of acres of really good corn, then hey, we'll let them plant it. We'll have moist soil over here. We'll fulfill the other habitat needs, and it'll all be good. We won't plant corn over on a refuge, or state WMA might sort of have the same mentality. So it's been really interesting to have these really high quality research studies come in and challenge some of our assumptions that there's just not that much food on private land. In some areas, there's a lot of food out there, and we think it's very dependable too, right? It's year after year after year. These duck clubs are doing, some of them, a fantastic job putting resources on the landscape, and we're going to try to account for those as best we can figure it out and build those into our planning models so that we can do as much as we can with our limited resources on refuges. I have no idea what your question was. Hopefully I answered.
I don't know. We're just kind of going with it now, but no, this like really brings up, so Winus Point. And you're familiar with those folks from when you were at Forbes and stuff. That whole area, Matt Palumbo, who was a PhD student that I worked with, I would say I gave Matt a fair amount of guidance. He worked with Scott Petrie as well, but he worked with John Simpson, Brendan Shirkey over there at Winus Point as well. And a lot of that around, Winus Point Marsh Conservancy mostly does moist soil. They plant some buckwheat for like early blue wing teal season and stuff, but a lot of them around there are just like seas of corn. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that that's up in northwest Ohio, and it's something like the corn could feed the ducks that are there 7 times over. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. I mean, Brendan just sent out their kind of like research update. It was about their great black duck telemetry work they're doing with Mitch Wiegman, University of Saskatchewan folks, and things like that. But they're froze up. They're froze up. Their duck season's been done for a while. We're collaborating with them on getting mallard samples for our ongoing mallard genetics work with Dominic Hockenberry and Phil Lavretsky. But they're froze up and their ducks are basically gone, and there's just corn sitting there, right? And so the argument would be, well, there should just be ducks there. Oh, so we are going to get a little into the corn debate, but not too much. But then you go to Columbia, Missouri, around Grand Pass, and that whole region, and some of the duck clubs near there, no names, very well known. Mm-hmm. And there's birds feeding in corn, walking around on ice, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's like, oh, the corn's holding them up. And I'm like, yeah, but we've run the weather severity index for Columbia, Missouri since October 13th till recently. Go to our Facebook page and look at this. I put it up. Heath and I are recording this before Christmas, so this is going to come out on Monday. We're well ahead of this, so I might have other posts. But dig back into that weather severity index for Columbia, Missouri. It's never hit a point where you would expect mallards to be decreasing at that latitude. Right. So I've always said this, like, you can have corn on the landscape like Winus Point does up in Ohio, but when it gets cold and it freezes like a brick for a long period of time, those birds are leaving. They don't just walk around the ice and just eat corn. They need other things to get to as well. So, I mean, we're never going to solve this one today. We're not going to solve it when I talk to the guy about legal stuff with Migratory Bird Treaty Act, but I hope the listeners are getting a little more information about analytically how this works to try to, feed birds out there, and maybe the benefits of crops in general in a landscape that has lost a lot of traditional wetlands. And the one thing I'll say, Heath, and I think you can agree with, is the only constant in this whole duck world and in the world in general is change.
That's right.
And these birds are moving to where they can find food. We've lost food resources at some places. We've gained them in others. It interplays with the weather for sure. And at the end of the day, man, there were folks that had ducks years ago that don't have them now. And now there's folks that have ducks that didn't have them years ago. This year's a perfect example for me. I lost. My mallards are gone for the most part, right? Like my marsh hunting is done. I lost half my season. So, and other years when it's warm, I've got them, and you don't.
That's right.
Don't, so.
It's complex, right? Like, does quote unquote your breeding population, did whatever that is, right? But to the extent that your area that you live in, that you duck hunt in, for the most part, you have sort of a area where ducks go to breed that generally more or less feeds your area. Yes, there's some mixing and whatnot, but we certainly know that the Saskatchewan Saskatchewan, right, as the prairies of Saskatchewan send a lot of mallards to the Arkansas Delta. We know that's a good linkage, and we know that Central Tennessee gets a lot of Great Lakes mallard birds, right? There's some mixing, but you have these source populations. It depends what happened there, right? So you see the BPOP survey, and there's all these birds every year. But if your little area didn't produce, or your breeding area didn't produce very well that year, that could affect you differently than everywhere else. It depends. Are duck seasons in north of you? What are duck seasons doing? Like, we haven't talked about sanctuary. I don't know that we need to get into that. Here, Mike, we'd be here a long time.
We'd be here all day. We're going to be good with wrapping up here pretty soon.
But like that's going to move ducks, at a fine scale around, or not move ducks around the landscape. I'm convinced more than food has anything to do with it, right? Or areas opened, weather north of you, like you say, like it's complex, and people do, and I understand, like, they want one thing, right? They want if we could pull on this lever, it would change things. And it's almost never that simple. It's just generally not about corn north of you or corn south of you, or, sometimes it's a little bit about weather. For some people, it's less about weather, depending on, what kind of birds they're shooting. And do they get a lot of early birds, or do they have to wait on the Missouri mallards, right, to really push out this time of year? So it's, people don't want to hear that, and I understand. I'm a duck hunter too, and I don't want to hear myself say it, but it's complicated. All the way back to your one of your original questions. Corn and other crops, they're an important component of the waterfowl management enterprise, right? They're a scientifically proven, valid management tool used by national wildlife refuges, by state WMAs, by private landowners, so on and so forth. They produce good food on the average, right? There's a reason that we eat corn, and ducks eat corn, and cows eat corn. You can be philosophically against it, but it is a nutritious, I'm going to get hate for this. It's a nutritious grain, right? It has good, decent protein levels. It has good carbohydrates. It's got good amino acids, so on and so forth. Well, I'm really getting out of my depth now.
I wanted to shit on corn for the longest time, and then I really looked into it. I'm like, damn it, it's actually pretty nutritionally complete. It's not nutritionally complete, but it's more so than other things that we can tend to grow and eat.
You're right. There's a reason we grow a lot of it on the landscape, because it's a really good food item, right? Food stock item, and ducks recognize that, and they and they access it because they can. That doesn't mean millet is a bad one to grow. It doesn't mean smartweed is a bad one to grow, right? All of these things work together. They produce different amino acids. They produce different protein levels and other things, and it's really about sort of that big recipe. If you're in a southern area trying to wait on the ducks, right, it's about sort of setting the table, and then managing your pressure in an area. It's not about the corn that's in the Missouri Boot Heel, or along the Illinois River, or in West Tennessee, or whatever. If you get enough pressure and you get enough weather, and we have big enough duck populations, right, those birds are going to move. There's just a lot going on.
I think it's gotten more complicated as the weather's gotten milder, because it used to be you had to feed birds in, I'm just going to go with Mississippi flyway stuff. You can pick any latitude you want. Look at Iowa and go east, go west. Pick your state, right? You used to have to feed ducks in that part of the world for a period of time, and then they'd be down in Missouri, and then they'd be pretty much at that area, Arkansas South, right, for the rest of winter. And now that wintering area seems to have really expanded. I mean, it's mid-Illinois, it's mid-Missouri. It might even be going towards northern Missouri at times now. And so it gets a lot tougher, because you could produce all this food in the South that ducks never show up and need, but then, like this year, they need it because it stays cold for an extended period of time. But then another year, they don't. And people are like, well, just let them run out of food in the north and they'll just fly south. And that isn't how it happens, because they can go east and west along the snow line, which tends to look like what they do. They go up rivers and they discover stuff. They kind of can mill anywhere around in that area, which used to be the boot heel of Missouri and South. And now it's expanded, and I think it's really just made it complicated for us to target where and when we put those resources, because the variation year to year has just gotten crazy wild. It's one of the reasons we started the Foul Weather podcast, because I'm like, no year is consistent. People are going to want to know where ducks are at, what's driving it. And it's it's almost like a light switch on and off. Like it's either really warm or really cold.
Right.
It's hard to find a tweener year anymore. That's just like, oh, that's a traditional duck migration year. It just doesn't seem to happen. So
Boy, we really don't need to go into the stuff. I tell you what, but I'll give a shout out to Lisa Webb and Bram Verheyen and some other folks that have done work on migration, trying to understand, from an unbiased perspective, like has my migration shifted? Has the wintering range shifted thousands of miles north? The answer is not really. But if you're at the southern end, right, you're in, southern Louisiana, you're at the southern end of the Atlantic Flyway. Yes, like those shifts are much bigger than the average. You certainly have lost mallards from those regions. You've lost some other birds from that region. You may be gaining blue-winged teal, right, and gadwall, but you certainly have changed, especially at the southern end of those historical wintering ranges. Now has the sort of centroid of these wintering ranges really shifted north? Not a lot, 100 kilometers, I think, a few hundred kilometers. We don't think it's massive, but there's some evidence to suggest that there is some of that spreading out of those wintering ranges because of what seems like a lot more variation. I don't know, and I don't have anything to quantify it. You probably do, Mike, but I buy that. It seems like there's just a lot of variation in what we see now, and and those ducks, some of them, boy, they sit and stick it out. We've had a number of research papers that have shown these marked birds. They'll just, if it's into January, they just hunker down and they're going to roll the dice. They're not going to move south. Mallards anyway, they're not going to move south at some point. They're going to hunker down and have faith that it's going to warm back up.
But what's like really weird is Ethan Dittmer's birds in Kansas. Like we went to that Great Lakes Symposium. It was at Winus Point, actually, with grad students. Good goodness, those guys drove so far, him and Corey, to come to that thing. It was fantastic. And, then I got him on the podcast in summer, and he's like, yeah, when your weather severity index said ducks should leave Kansas, it didn't matter. Like, they did it in, like, the second week of January, and they boogied down to, like, eastern Arkansas rivers type thing, right?
Interesting.
So there are these differences out there. It seems like ducks try to stick it out in some places and not others, and that's the complexity of food, water availability, like what are they feeding on, how shallow are those wetlands, are there rivers nearby, right? And these birds are not, actually, I don't want to give them a lot of credit. They're just reacting to what's around them. But I was going to say they're not stupid, but I honestly think ducks are kind of stupid. But
not around decoys, I feel like. That might say something about me as a duck.
Not around your decoys. Yeah.
That might be on me and not the duck.
Well, it's easy for me to say where they're coming out of Ontario and Quebec to us. And sometimes when they come across Lake Ontario and we've got spinners out in the marsh and it's a migration day, we're the first thing they've seen, and they are dumb. That's why I love my migration days. But hey, let's not go on any more tangents, Heath. I do think that this was a very fact-filled, we wandered a little bit, which was fun, but a very fact-filled episode that maybe helps people understand how we work with calories on the landscape and what crops do. But let's end with this, a very simple but complex question for you. What can people do to help the ducks?
What can people do to help the ducks? If you can only do one thing, a duck stamp is a fantastic thing to go purchase. If you're a waterfowl hunter, then you're going to have to buy a federal duck stamp. If you're not a waterfowl hunter, it's a fantastic thing to go purchase, because that money is going to go right to protecting breeding habitat. You can also, donate to a number of nonprofit groups. I'm not gonna advocate for any one here, but a lot of them do fantastic work. Not just in the breeding areas, which is very important, but also work that feeds into wintering areas, that goes to refuges, to private lands, through private lands improvement programs. So lots of ways that you can contribute. You don't have to give money to. You can just be a supporter, right? If you're a political supporter of of wetland conservation, waterfowl habitat initiatives. That's great too. We will take you into the fold, right, of this community where we love ducks, we love waterfowl habitat, duck habitat, we love wetlands. Love to see more of them on the landscape and protected. So not just one thing you can do. Certainly a duck stamp is great. Certainly getting involved with one of the nonprofit groups or going and volunteering at a national wildlife refuge. Hey, great opportunities at refuges where, we've got some capacity issues and we'd love to have you come out and help us out at a national wildlife refuge that's near you. They're greater than 500 across the country. So there's probably one somewhere near you. A little plug for the refuge system there, Mike.
Well, and hunters too sometimes are underrepresented in those. I feel in those volunteer opportunities, right? A lot of us are already involved by buying, paying, doing other things, and the birding community, the non-hunting community, very often seems to be the largest constituency in a national wildlife refuge that is volunteering, and it's probably to the benefit of waterfowl hunters to show our faces outside of the season. And kind of just be there for the staff. I work a lot just because I work with students and bring them to the local refuges a lot. But we get out, we do invasive species, days where we help pull water chestnut and other bad nasties that are out there. But yeah, and I probably don't do as much as I should either, honestly. So maybe your comment, I should grab my boots by their straps and find time to do more, I guess.
See if you can catch somebody in one of those refuge offices and just say hi, just say, hey, can we do anything for you? And they may not have the time or, there's paperwork that has to be done, right? They may not be able to integrate you into everything. But some of them certainly are going to have some opportunities for you, and you might get to go out and help shoot a rocket net and band a bunch of ducks. That happens on refuges and state lands all over every summer, and that's a really awesome way to participate, to help out, and to do something that most people don't get to put the bands on the duck and let it go. It's a pretty special thing if you've never done that, and there are lots of opportunities late in the summer for that to happen as well.
And we had an opportunity this year at our refuge nearby that they were just down maintenance people, and they needed people to mow the lawn around the office and near the visitor center. And the only stipulation was you couldn't have a lawn soda, but if you do like riding a mower and helping out, they're like, yeah, no lawn sodas while you're mowing refuge lands. But, you can fill out paperwork, and if you can push a mower and run a weed eater and stuff, we'll have you on. And those are honestly just small but important things for these folks. So
that's fantastic. And one last plug, if I can, there for early career individuals, there are lots of opportunities. Right now, we have biotech positions, our seasonal positions, mostly during the summer, but they can stretch out into the spring and fall as well. And there are hundreds, maybe thousands available on refuges right now on USA Jobs. And so set up an account and go look. If you're an early career professional, those are usually 5, 6, GS 5, 6, 7 positions, and can be a lot of fun. Also, you get to do a lot of interesting things. Again, band ducks, do waterfowl surveys, mow the yard, run a weed eater, run a chainsaw, not with a what you call a lawn soda. Is that what you call it? That's
lawn sodas.
So you can have a lawn soda while you do it, but you can have a lot of fun, and you get opportunities all over the United States. So go get out of your comfort zone and go somewhere else and experience something. Live in a refuge bunkhouse, out in the country, and it can be a neat experience if you're kind of early career.
There's a lot of us in the waterfowl world that wouldn't be where we're at today without those seasonal jobs. I remember working Northeast South Dakota for a 4-month period, and it was life-changing living on the breeding grounds for the summer. And so, yeah, for those of you kids out there that are listening, go for it. And heck, for those of you that just need a career change, right? It's right. I've got a ton of people that just skipped out of what they were doing, went to community college, and then went on and got in as a wildlife biologist and took their passion for the ducks and made it into reality and work at a wildlife management area or national wildlife refuge now. So it's there's always time. But Heath, we don't have any more time, so we have to let you go and go do Christmas stuff with the family. I really appreciate you making time during this kind of holiday season, and all the best to you and your family. Safe travels, and keep doing the good work for the ducks that I know you're doing with the Fish and Wildlife Service and all your partners.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Thanks to all your listeners for tuning in. And if they're still with us, the one or two people who made it all the way through the episode, the corn episode, but we're happy you listened. And yeah, reach out if you have any questions, or I can answer anything or need any follow up. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so much, Heath. And up next, our duck migration forecast for the week. How many days have you had empty skies over the duck blind? Your property can be more with wildlife strategies. It is no secret that hiring a consultant, an expert in managing water, woods, and fields, an expert in duck food, an expert in hunting pressure management, hiring a consultant yields better habitat for the critters you chase. Less empty skies, more quality days afield, more smiles for miles with family and friends. If that's your game and goal, contact Ryan Delaney at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. The Farmland Group is your one-stop shop for real estate brokerage, consulting, management, lending, and appraisal across Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, Louisiana, Georgia, Tennessee, and growing. Contact them today at farmlg.com. Hey, I'm telling you, do not hesitate, because these folks are busy buying, selling, and providing consulting and management strategies that build value into your portfolio on your land. So get in the queue today. Get on their radar. Get on their books. Man, y'all won't be disappointed. Contact the Farmland Group today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. All right, last reminder for the year that if you want to use your discount code FOULWEATHER to get 10% off your order from ShotSweeper, you have to do it before January 1st. You also can use the code MIDSEASON to get an additional 10% off your ShotSweeper order. You heard me, 20% off, but that ends this week. So don't delay, get your ShotSweeper today. It's a novel invention by duck hunter and biologist Walt Rhodes that detects non-toxic shot in meat. Don't make another trip to the dentist because you didn't use the ShotSweeper. Also, next week, we have Mike Orapollo, partner with the law firm Barclay Damon. Mike specializes in the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and he will speak to the legalities of flooded crops. So don't miss that one either. We also know you all have been waiting on the Merg Squad 3.0 Kitchen Conversations episode, but between my real job, the holidays, and just busy chasing ducks and deers, we haven't been able to get the edit done to get it out, but promises it is coming soon, probably this week. Okay, so last week was pretty lame concerning duck migration and our duck migration forecast too, with that heat dome over much of the South and extending well into the upper Midwest. But our tune changes this week with a weird mixed bag of weather that varies throughout the week in all four flyways. Let's have a quick look, though, at the numbers first. We're pretty tired of folks calling out agencies for lying about duck numbers. Those of you that are not seeing ducks or not shooting ducks probably are trying to hunt the same blind your grandpappy hunted post-World War II. The only constant in duck hunting is change, my friends. Remember that. Ducks do exist, and they exist in the South at better numbers than they have in the past few years. As we've always said, if you ain't killing ducks, you might just suck at duck hunting. It's tongue-in-cheek, man. Don't take it personally. There is no gain, though, in a state or federal wildlife agency lying about the number of ducks they count. What is that gain? There's zero. None. So maybe you just suck at duck hunting. Sorry, we said it again. Let's start in Missouri because that cold certainly decreased their duck numbers. On the week of December 15th, MDC's duck estimate was 22.3% less than the previous 5-year average of about 615,000 ducks on their waterfowl conservation area. And mallards were 23.2% less than the previous 5-year estimate of 472,000 mallards. So just like normal, the large majority, 70, 80, 90% of their ducks at this time of year are mallards. Some of this decrease has to do with low duck populations overall, but they've been low for the recent past, and that is why we use the 5-year average, the 5-year estimate, and not the 20-year estimate. So the interpretation overall is that Missouri has less ducks, and our WSI predicted they would be farther south, like in Mississippi and Louisiana. For Louisiana's coastal region, aerial surveys estimated 1.66 million ducks in Louisiana's coastal region and Little River Basin, a 6% increase from December 2024, an increase of 8% from the most recent 5-year average, with greatest increases compared to last December for canvasback, scaup, widgeon, and pintails, with widgeon coming in at a whopping 434,000 birds. Pintails, more than other ducks, fly over other states during the early dry period of early fall, go to the coastal region, and then redistribute when or if winter rains flood the MAV in other areas to the north. Have a look at our Facebook page. We put up kind of it was on Sunday, yesterday, I think, in the morning, what a typical La Nina pattern looks like, and then what our kind of river gauges are at. And that southeast region, southern U.S. is pretty dry, and there is no indication that is going away the rest of the season. So be ready for that, folks, right? That's probably going to be a thing, so be prepared for it to stay dry. Figure it out. For Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, they flew December 15th to the 19th and had 31% more total ducks than the recent 5-year average, but that was dominated by 86% more mallards than the recent 5-year average. So as predicted by our weather severity index, ducks moved south in abundance in November, but especially December this year, and certainly earlier than in the past few years. Again, if photo period was the major driver of duck migration, we would see the same number of ducks at the same time each year in basically the same place, and we don't. Hey, let's do this. In fact, let's tackle a really good comment by a listener, a very loyal listener who I communicate with quite a bit, who hunts around Bob Brown Waterfowl Conservation Area in Missouri. This is northwest Missouri, right on the Missouri-Kansas border. The comment came after the last episode about the quote-unquote reverse migration, and this guy noted that they see returns of ducks to the area when it warms up after a cold front. He also sent me all the bird per average kind of information from Bob Brown for the kind of the recent past, it's also available on the MDC webpage. So I went back and pulled all those data from November 1st until December 26th and ran some stats. First, the duck per hunter average declined throughout the season, with 70% of that variation attributable to date. The other 30% was attributable to our weather severity index, but for those of you that are stat nerds out there, day of the year, date, and WSI were also correlated, so we can't fully attribute the decline in duck per hunter average to date or WSI. They're kind of confounded with each other, right? All we can say is just that they both contribute. But we do know from our prior published work that numbers of ducks on Missouri conservation areas are related more to weather than photo period. Anyhow, that all sounds confusing, but then we ran the same analysis of ducks per hunter and day of the year for just December, and we found no relationship, suggesting that although there was a recent small bump in duck per hunter average on the warm-up, that it just wasn't significant over time, mostly because they hit about a 3 duck per hunter average for one day, and then it went back down to below 2 ducks per hunter. So it was kind of like, yeah, there was some recent increase. There was like one day of success, maybe 2 around it. But what likely occurred around Bob Brown, it's mostly shallow moist soil habitat. That during that December freeze, ducks moved a short distance away to open water, and then on the thaw, they moved back into that high quality foraging habitat to kind of curtail their fat loss or reduce their fat loss. That is, ducks did not move back north from Arkansas or southern Kansas. These were probably ducks within 50 miles, just redistributing on their wintering area. Anyhow, if anyone has telemetry data that disputes this claim, let us know, because you might see a rebound in the number of ducks, but that by no means suggests they came from a long distance and had started to migrate back north for the spring already, which would have been easily called a reverse migration. Actually, no, there's no such thing as reverse migration. We got to quit using that term altogether. All right. So that's a long-winded way of saying that ducks moved better and earlier to their wintering areas this year and have been reshuffling on that wintering area to find food and safety as the weather varied throughout December. Period. That's all that's going on, folks. All right, on to this week's migration forecast. Let's start with mallards, because we do see, as noted last week, continued reshuffling, but a very short-term reshuffling early in the week. There is nothing to indicate any large-scale movement of mallards south in the coming week, but, where you have them, we see opportunities on moving water, say rivers, early in the week in the upper Pacific and mid-latitude Central and Mississippi flyways. Again, a redistribution from shallow water towards rivers, as well as maybe some field feeding where it is available. What we see is a strong but short cold front last night, Sunday night, through today, Monday night. But by midday Tuesday, we see a warm-up starting, and that warm-up on Tuesday is going to last through the rest of the week. So a move of mallards, a reshuffling, and other ducks hanging in shallow waters to big water and rivers, mostly Missouri, Kansas, Colorado latitudes. And this is happening early in the week, and then a shift back to thawing shallow wetlands around Wednesday and Thursday. At the same time, in the Atlantic flyway, we see a warm-up yesterday, Sunday, and into today, Monday. But then the cold that was in the mid-continent shifts east. There is a possibility of some shallow water areas in the Atlantic flyway developing in fields with temperatures reaching the mid-40s and a half inch to an inch of rain in some areas. Up in the northern portions, say New York, southern Ontario, and parts of New England. But it is very short-lived as the cold from the mid-continent shifts east, with temperatures never getting out of the 20s all week for the latitude of our home office here in Jack's Reef after Tuesday or tomorrow morning. So I do think we have a movement of remaining mallards and black ducks out of the northern latitudes, but only as far south or maybe just to the next piece of open water on Tuesday afternoon into Wednesday in the Atlantic flyway. So nothing really big going on here. I'm just telling you, mallards are sticky this week for the most part. Some reshuffling locally, some really small movements, but really, for folks in the northern portion of the Atlantic flyway, 90% of the ducks are south of us. It's just that the remaining birds in the north are concentrated and susceptible to harvest, giving the illusion that there are more ducks than earlier in the season, at least for dabbling ducks. Certainly, the diving duck hunting along the East Coast has been better than past years, with all the Great Lakes shallow bays, as well as Lake St. Clair, locked right up. Remember, there's sometimes 250,000 to 500,000 canvasbacks on Lake St. Clair alone. Whew. Anyhow, with it locked up, those ducks are someplace else, and it's farther south. Farther down the Atlantic flyway, mallards and black ducks should be at peak numbers around Maryland and Delaware, that latitude, and sustain that way for the week. Some small movements in the northern portions of Chesapeake Bay for mallards and black ducks is expected this week, but that will only be a short distance movement and most likely on like New Year's Day, with maybe some movement to as far down the bay as kind of the southeastern shore of Maryland late in the week. The other dabbling ducks stay really concentrated around Hyde County, North Carolina, and with places farther south like South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida seeing better duck numbers in the coming week than all year. All right, so think about that. duck numbers in the coming week for South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida should be better than all year in the coming week, based on small movements of early wimpy ducks all week as they seek slightly warmer conditions. Our WSI combined with wind conditions suggests that Friday into Saturday provide the best days for some fresh ducks at the southern portion of the Atlantic Flyway. More on the wimpy ducks as we go back to the Central and Mississippi Flyway. The pintails on the coast are expected to remain sticky, but pintails holding strong in that kind of southern Missouri over to Oklahoma latitude are predicted to move south in small numbers into coastal Texas and Louisiana early in the week. Tuesday is the pick day for fresh pintails and maybe a small movement of gadwall as well. But most shoveler, widgeon, and green-winged teal are where they are going to be for the season in most of the Central and Mississippi flyways. Of course, always some movement. We don't predict how every single duck moves. Last, we hit the Pacific Flyway because it does look like a bit of cold this week. A little colder than it has been for several weeks after a strong early cold that moved ducks out of Alaska and the western provinces towards the south. The Pacific Flyway weather has gotten really moderate and not conducive to duck migration overall. Early this week, there is at least cold conditions, not enough to make the mallards move, but I'd expect a movement of all other dabbling ducks into locales farther south and especially into Oregon and California. Kind of that central Oregon, central California. Pintails that have been hanging farther north will be on the move this week, especially early in the week, along with other dabbling ducks. Tuesday looks to bring some fog and low ceiling to the central and Sac Valley of California. This is going to make conditions ripe for good duck shooting, and that's our pick day for y'all, kind of that Tuesday fog day. Some other less thought of states when it comes to duck hunting, southern Arizona and New Mexico, along with southwest Texas, should have a bang-up chance at fresh ducks from the north. Mostly these will be pintail, gadwall, and widgeon, but some shoveler, green-winged teal in the mix as well. And that stuff's, again, going on early in the week with probably the best day looking like Tuesday or Wednesday. All right, folks, a way better forecast and much more to talk about this week than last, so have a great week on the water and in the timber. My friends across duck country, Happy New Year. Make this year better than the last. Be there for your fellow duck hunter. I tell you, we are a small group of folks that are bonded by the ducks that bless our lives. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.
Two kinds of fishing out here. One for fish, one for your data. Hackers try to hook you, but Cisco Duo keeps every user and device protected. Cisco Duo. Fishing season is over. Learn more at duo.com.
Introducing Taking Share, Lessons from Leaders with Rob Holmes, Chairman, President, and CEO of Texas Capital. During each episode, you will hear from leaders, decision makers, and culture shapers across industries. What drives them? What tips the scales when making tough calls? How do they continue to evolve? We're here to understand the thoughts behind their actions and discover how they are taking share. For more information on Texas Capital, please visit us at our website.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here, wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah?
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.